Hello, beautiful people. Thank you for being here today. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. I'm going to give it a few minutes. I would love to hear from whoever shows up. Drop a comment below and say hello. Just drop a heart. Just let me know who is here today. I've been sharing a lot and talking about boundaries recently, and last night in the Break the Cycles online program that I do, I led the women through a small practice to ask questions and explore within our body the boundaries we have. But we go deep into the meaning around boundaries, the different types. How do we know we need them? And understanding that our relationships with ourselves and with everyone else can be so much better by simply having boundaries and communicating them. Today, I want to share about boundaries because I used to be somebody who didn't have many boundaries. I would allow myself to overshare and overgive and people please and take care of everybody but myself. So now letting myself be in this space where I can give to myself before I give to others has been really profoundly helpful, and I want to help other people do that. So as you're coming in, I want to hear in the comments, how do you feel about boundaries? Are they something you want? Do you have them? Are you super strict and have a lot of boundaries? Are they rigid? Or are they something you know you need, you haven't necessarily gotten or started to have too much? I am going to just make sure I can see who's here. So I see a few of you. Let me hear you below. Who's here? Drop a heart and let me know, how do you feel about boundaries? Do you have a lot of boundaries? Do you make sure you stick to what you need, or how do you feel about them? I used to hate boundaries. They used to feel icky and yucky and hard to me. I felt like I couldn't. Hello, Auntie JJ. Thanks for being here. I used to not have the best boundaries and feel really icky about them. And there's different layers to boundaries. There's the physical ones around how close you want somebody to you, but there's also the energetics, the boundaries around keeping yourself protected and clear along. Hello, Tina. Thank you for tuning in. Around keeping your energy in and their energy in and keeping yourself protected. I like to describe boundaries as it's a fence you have around. It's not a huge wall because that keeps everybody out. We need to be able to let people in, but it's a fence so that people know the perimeters of where that you feel comfortable having them. So boundaries are, a safeguard for ourselves to not overextend ourselves. Yes, at age 60, my boundaries are much more defined. Speaking up about my boundaries is much easier. It definitely, yes, gets easier with age and time. It gets easier with practice and communicating. And the first step really is to get clear on what your boundaries are. And yeah, sometimes they change too. Tina says, used to not have any boundaries, but now I have some and still working on it. Yeah, and it's a practice. The fact that you at least have some now is a huge deal because we have to really protect ourselves, honor ourselves, and remember the value we have and how much we need to value ourselves, our boundaries, what our wants and needs are, so other people do the same. Oh, thank you. I love you too. I do my best to keep sharing the love. Thank you. I want everyone to have, healthy relationships with themselves and those around them. And I really believe that's coming back to our body, coming back to ourselves, finding clarity, communicating with love and truth of what we need and what our desires are, and owning them, allowing them. We can't communicate boundaries if we don't know what they are. So how many of you don't even know what your boundaries are? I used to not know. I used to not really understand how to have boundaries, what they were. Like, if you knew me 10 years ago, oof, okay. I'm very grateful to have them now. But so I want to talk a little bit more about boundaries. They help us define the roles of the relationship. How many of you have been in a situationship where you don't really know where you lay in their life? You're not really sure how much they want to be in yours. Like, you're, doing things, but there's no communication around what you'd like or what you don't like, what your expectations are. So when we can clarify our needs and our wants and communicate them, that's going to help both of you understand your relationship, get what you want and need from it, and help grow it and work on it. It's a way to feel safe and supported. I have a lot of women who come to me and they're like, I don't really feel safe in my body, or they've had a lot of trauma, so that safety is a big concern. And personally, for me too, feeling safe within myself, within my relationships, with men, and with masculine energy, I didn't know how to feel safe or protected because I wasn't when I was younger. So learning what that looks like now, we have to create boundaries to feel that. And it's how we foster these healthy relationships and understand the needs that for you and them. It's not fair for just one person to be getting their needs met. Both of them have to be giving and taking. It has to be reciprocal, not just a give, give, give. Now you're feeling empty and depleted. How many of you know how that is? You know, giving and taking care of everybody else, and then you're like, okay, I'm exhausted. I don't have any time for me. If we don't have these boundaries, then we can't take time for self-care and our own happiness and joy. So we have to have boundaries. I'm very passionate about this. I want to share with you because we have to use them to create healthier relationships. If you don't have boundaries, you're not going to have healthy relationships. So some signs that you may be needing some boundaries. We're also going to talk about sometimes we have too many boundaries, sometimes we don't have enough. But some signs that boundaries are needed would be that you are feeling really overwhelmed with having to do so much, or you're feeling overwhelmed with tasks and plans and things you have to do for other people, or just feeling overwhelmed in general and exhausted and burnt out. That is showing that you're overextending, you're doing too much. This last week or two, have really been like looking at where I'm putting my energy and what is helping, what do I want, and if it's something that is what I really am getting anything back for. Is it reciprocal? Because if we don't have boundaries, we can start to feel resentful and angry and upset that no one's helping us, or that we're too wore out, too much going on. But if you're feeling resentment for when people do ask you for help, that probably means you've been doing too much. You've been overextending yourself way too much. And then that means if you're avoiding people who might ask you for help, who might ask you to do something for them, or somebody who you know pushes your boundaries, that could be a sign that you need to have stronger boundaries with them. No time for self-care is saying you don't have boundaries. Not feeling appreciated or that it's reciprocal return, like I had just mentioned. And when you give in easily. I do want to share that I understand when we first start having boundaries, my first word of advice is don't start right away with your closest relationships, because those are the hardest. So start somewhere that's a little easier, whether it's an acquaintance or maybe it's easier at work. Where can you start putting in boundaries? Because if you don't have any, it's really hard to be like, okay, all of a sudden I have to make sure I have boundaries and I'm doing, saying no to this. And sometimes it might seem really harsh and you might feel like, oh, I feel bad. I don't feel like I should, because you're afraid of not being liked, of not having friends, of not being supported, of them people leaving you. If people stop being your friend because you have boundaries, they weren't your friends. They were using and taking advantage of you. I know that hurts to hear. But our friends care about us. They want to nurture the relationship. They want us to both feel happy and love each other in a I want the best for you kind of way. So who is one person in your life that you think you could start holding a better boundary with? Could it be your neighbor around, hey, I'm really sorry I can't help do that yard work for you, or if I'm going to, I would need a little bit of pay, or is it at work you can start saying no to staying late? Where can you find more space for you? Because when you say no to somebody else, you're saying yes to you. That's something that's really helped me with saying no, is that when we say no to somebody else, We're saying yes to us. Yes to time for me. Yes to do the things I really want and enjoy. And yes, there's definitely times to help and take care of each other, but as long as there's a balance and it's reciprocal, it's not exhausting you. Also, it's important to just know that people aren't going to know your boundaries. We can't assume that people will figure them out, especially if they do something wrong and we react. That's not going to help them figure it out. We have to communicate them, and we have to follow through with them. So boundaries have two things. It's communication and then action. You have to communicate what your boundaries are, what you're available for, what you want, what you need, and what you can't do. And then hold your ground. When they try to push back or react a certain way, you have to be able to be okay with the answer. Maybe sometimes they are going to be defensive, or they're going to give you the silent treatment or make you feel guilty for holding them. And that's not yours to carry. That's theirs. That is theirs. We must really amp up our self-care. Yeah, I suck at that part. Yeah, so then people are just going to keep pushing. If you're not sticking to it, then people are going to keep pushing. It is, I get it. It is hard because we want to have connection and family. We want to be liked. We want to help others. We also have to help ourselves, and we have to be our own friend. Somebody in Break the Cycle said that last night, and I was like, that is beautiful. We do. We have to be our own friend. We have to make sure that we are treating ourselves like we treat others. How many of you are taken care of, worried about everybody else, but you haven't slowed down enough to take care of you? So there's also the flip side is also I've worked with some women who have more rigid boundaries. So there's porous boundaries and rigid boundaries. Rigid boundaries are where your walls are all the way up. You're not being vulnerable. You're not letting people in. You're really afraid to let anybody in. Yes, Becky says holding the ground is the hardest part for you. So practice. But the thing is, at first you have to get clear on it. What is your boundary? What is your want and your need? And why? Why do you need this? Because then when you know the why, you can remind yourself. And you can say things. When I first started holding boundaries, I had to really pump myself up. I had to write it down and be like, okay, why do I want this? What is this going to help? And have extra sentences and extra words and reasons of okay, this is why I have to stick to this. And I'll be honest, in relationship, I used to be with men who didn't respect me because I didn't respect myself. I would try to hold a boundary or say I need this, and then they wouldn't do it, and I would still just be with them because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't believe I could have better or believe in my own values and truth. So when we do that, they feel that they are going to dig into those areas that we feel those feelings too. So we have to hold strong and show to them no, step up or I got to move on. Unfortunately, it's hard and it does get lonely sometimes, but it's worth it because better people are going to be there. We don't want a huge, busy circle of friends around us when they're really just acquaintances and they're not actually helping or reciprocating anything. When that circle starts to clear out and you're just with the people who are actually a give and take and it feels good, it gets much better. Life gets juicier and more pleasurable and joyful. You have more energy. You feel more excited to do the things. You have more space to rest and slow down. So I want to go back. So rigid boundaries are when you just cut people out right away and you're a little too harsh. You have really strict rules. That you have these walls up because of the fear of being hurt or somebody hurting you and taking advantage of you. Sometimes we have those walls so far up that we won't let anybody in. Those are rigid. We don't want rigid boundaries. And then there's the porous boundaries that are the loose, they're weak, they're barely expressed. You're not holding them. We're not actually having the ability to say no. And then you're accepting mistreatment. You're really having this fear of being rejected. And there's this enmeshment and codependency. Lack of boundaries definitely creates codependency. And either side isn't helpful. there's always kind of like a pendulum, right? I went from one side of having way too many boundaries and being scared to let anybody in, not being vulnerable, protecting myself, um, to opening up and having lack of boundaries and oversharing, or I'd go back, right? It was like I would go back and forth because I didn't know what healthy boundaries looked like. I didn't know what being vulnerable was about, or how to do it, or how to feel safe doing it, right? So it's a process and it's okay. But healthy, this is my favorite quote, healthy boundaries are possible when your past doesn't show up in your present interaction. So think about your interactions that you have right now. Are you afraid to let somebody in because you've been hurt by somebody else you've let in before, so you keep your walls up? Or do you overshare and seek attention and share really personal details, hoping to connect with somebody because you need attention so bad because you didn't get the love you wished in your last relationship or in childhood? Sometimes that's really hard to hear or to realize. But healthy boundaries look like being clear about your values, listening to and valuing your own opinion and worth, really understanding that you deserve to be held, to be supported, to be honored and respected, and that it's helping it. It's also about sharing with others appropriately. How can you find, especially, especially with the pandemic and the way we've been having a distance and we get less connection. So now we're like, wait, how do we communicate? How do I have friends? What do I do when I go out? Like it's been different to live through this. And how do we know what a healthy amount of sharing is? What's appropriate? And then what's a healthy amount of vulnerability? Because yes, we still have to protect ourselves. We can't be too vulnerable and let somebody walk all over us. But I truly believe if we would speak more in like I feel and I want and I need, and share about our needs and our desires and what we're feeling, that we could do a lot better in this world. We could have a lot better relationships, and there would be more love and peace in this planet if we were more vulnerable with our feelings and our truth. And we have to be comfortable saying no. Healthy boundaries means we have to say no sometimes. And on the flip side, we have to feel comfortable hearing no. I used to be the worst of that. I'm like, nobody tells me no. I'm like, that's rude as hell. That's not respecting them. That's just me being selfish. So where do you feel comfortable hearing no? And when was the last time you heard no? And how did you feel? But yet, when was the last time you said no? I just had to this morning. My uncle called to see if I could come over and help him with something. And I was like, I'm sorry, but no, way too last minute. I have too many things I have to get done today. And that's okay. We still have a great relationship. So yeah, being comfortable saying no, hearing no. And when you hear the no from somebody else, knowing that it's not personal, not taking it on as what not taking it on as your own stuff. It's theirs. They can't do it, or maybe they're not available because they have so much going on, or they don't feel comfortable doing this, and we have to honor that. Like, all right, cool. Now that means I have to choose what my next steps will be according to how that boundary is accepted or held or pushed or not. There are a lot of not so good ways people respond to boundaries. So be prepared. Sometimes, there's going to be some pushback, especially when you first start holding them. People are like, wait, what? There's going to be some pushback around boundaries because they're not used to it and they're testing. There could be, limit testing of, oh, but are you sure? Let me see. Like, if I ask again or if I try again, what are you going to do? And that's where you have to continue to state your truth. Like, again, say the exact same thing if you have to. Sometimes people might ignore you and try to do it anyways, or they might give you this silent treatment or ghost you and disappear. Like, Those aren't your people. If you're getting these like defensiveness and questioning and these things, like, you deserve better than that. Yes, there's some people who are going to be a little confused and need to understand them a little more, and maybe it's different for them to see you holding boundaries, so they need a little more of explanation, and that's okay. As long as in the end they respect you and value you and go with it and like, okay, you're right, let's do this, right? And there can be a little compromise. I was also explaining about flexibility. So people aren't going to respect your boundaries if you're really too openly flexible, right? So say we put a boundary up, right? So this is my boundary. And then within that boundary, there's room for some space and flow because you don't want to be rigid. But outside of that boundary, them pushing it or trying to do more, that and then you accepting that, that's going to be too flexible and they're going to push it and not trust in your word, really. And then, some people will accept them and they'll say, yes, you're right. Okay, sounds good. And that's amazing. But prepare yourself. Know that sometimes it's going to be a whole conversation. And that's why I said at the beginning is I would have to pump myself up and talk myself into it, write it down like what it is, why I want this, why I have this want or this need, because boundaries help us feel safe in the relationship. And if you want that relationship to prosper, you have to feel safe and communicate. Any thoughts, comments, or questions? I'd love to hear them below. I'd love to know, what was the biggest takeaway so far? What really resonated, and what did you need to hear today? And then before we go, I just want to do a quick drop in to bring you into the body because this is what we need. So wherever you are, close the eyes down, get comfortable wherever, as long as it's safe for you to do so. Closing the eyes down, breathing into the body. Taking some deep breaths and just letting yourself be really present in this moment. Relaxing the muscles of the head and the eyes, the jaw, the neck. Letting the shoulders settle in and the chest. Slowly melting. Relaxing every muscle down to the hips, the legs, and the feet. As you're present and in your body right now, connecting the heart space to your sacred womb, asking yourself, where do I need healthy boundaries? Noticing what the first reply is, not questioning it, just noticing it, observing. And what do I value? What do I desire? Because the values and the desires is how we can find what our boundaries are and how I can create healthier boundaries that are helpful in my relationship. Just exploring this within. I desire to be or to have. Whatever it is, fill in the blank. And I deserve it. I can get it by communicating. Fill in the blank. What do you need to communicate? Who do you need to communicate to? And what does it feel like when we go into boundaries? Do you feel like you need more or do you need less? Just explore within the body what boundaries feel like. Taking another few breaths. Allowing whatever came up to settle in. What do you need around boundaries? Boundaries around money, around hanging out with friends, around going out. Where can you honor yourself more, sister? You can slowly open your eyes and come back to this space. I hope that you felt really good about this and it resonated and you are inspired to hold more boundaries and to do more. That you're feeling this motivation of, okay, let me get clear on my desires, on what my values are, and now I can share my truth and help my relationships grow by communicating my wants and needs. And it will get better and better. I love you all so much. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for being here. I hope you loved this, and I hope to see you next time.